Good afternoon. This is a presentation on how to identify some of the local reptiles and amphibians. The orders of amphibians include anurans, those are the toads and frogs. Caudata are salamanders and newts, the ones with 4 legs and a long tail. And Gymnophiona, we call them caecilians. They look kind of like earthworms, so like salamanders without legs. Under reptiles, we have squamata, which includes snakes and lizards, and testudines. Those are the turtles and the tortoises. In Northern Ontario, we don't have any caecilians, any lizards, or any tortoises. There is one lizard found in Ontario, and it is a skink, but it's not found in our area. Starting off with the anurans, we have the toad, American toad. It's the only one in the north. There is another toad found in the far south of Ontario, and it makes a high-pitched call, kind of a, I'm going to see if this will open for you. You'll have to listen to it on your own. I don't know how to pull that up in any form. Next up, I have the woodland frogs. At the top, you've got a little tiny tree frog with a cross on its back. That's the spring peeper. It's like the size of your thumbnail. They're teeny tiny. And then beside that little guy is what we call the tree frog. And it is both the spring peeper and the gray tree frog are tree frogs. But the gray tree frog is the one that we typically call tree frog. It is one of my favorite amphibians. It just is so beautiful. It comes in so many colors. It's bumpy like a toad is, kind of, and has a lichen look to it, but it will come in greens and grays and browns. Very pretty frog. We call it Hyla versicolor because of the amazing color variation. And then this guy at the bottom with the black eye band is the wood frog. And he's got some yellow you can see down at his legs as well. Wood frogs are famous for freezing solid over winter and thawing themselves out again. They do this by changing their blood sugar levels, but they're very well studied. The wood frog sounds like 2 sticks kind of being hit together like ducks. The peeper, you guys probably are familiar with, high-pitched peeping, and the tree frog has a ring to it, like a brrr. Sort of like the toad is like a high-pitched tree frog. They all are quite common in our area and pretty distinctive once you get an idea of them. Now, these two are a little bit more difficult to tell apart. In fact, frequently I have campers bring me bullfrogs, or what they think are bullfrogs, and they're actually just really big green frogs. Green frogs are very common. Bullfrogs are less common. Green frogs are the ones that sort of sound like banjos. Bullfrogs have that large, loud croak. When you look at them, the green frog has a lateral fold that goes a long way down its back. The bullfrog is lacking that. It has a lateral fold that follows its tympanic membrane. The green frog sometimes has a mild fold following its tympanic membrane, but it always has that lateral fold, and the bullfrog always doesn't. But they otherwise can look quite similar, although they sound very different. Here we have 3 very common frogs. You've probably seen a leopard frog. You've probably seen a mink frog. You might have seen a pickerel frog. The leopard frog is the really green one. Pickerel frogs are browner. Pickerel frogs tend to have more rectangular spots, more evenly placed. Leopard frogs, much more splotchy. And then the mink frog looks like a child's painting. Just colors everywhere, no distinctive splotches. And you're going to have to listen to their calls because I have no way of describing them to you. They all sound like wood, I don't know. just listen to them, because they do sound distinctive once you listen to them. They're quite easy, but try and mimic them, I don't think I can. This brings us on to Caudata. These are our salamanders and newts. I, of course, am going to start off with my little plethodontids. These are the lungless forest salamanders. The eastern red-backed salamander comes in 3 color phases, so while it can be red-backed, it can sometimes be what we call lead-backed, where it's black and has tiny little star-like spots all over it. And then it sometimes has an orange or yellow phase. Looking very similar to our red-backed salamander are the 2-lined and 4-toed salamanders. Both of them are less common. 4-toed salamander has a very limited range. Eastern red-backed salamanders are one of the most common critters in eastern North America. And the 2-lined salamander almost always is found beside water, where there is some kind of running stream. They're much more likely to be found where there's moving water or pools or ponds or something. Whereas eastern red-backed salamanders live completely in the forest. They don't even have a tadpole stage. All of these guys are small, like the size of your finger. They don't even have lungs. They just get oxygen through diffusion. Slightly bigger, we have our mole salamanders. These guys will fit in your hand. They can get quite big, but they're usually closer in this size range. If it's got bright yellow spots, you've got a spotted salamander. And I, in fact, usually just call it a yellow spotted salamander, because to me that is the more vibrant spotted salamander. And then you also have a blue spotted salamander. And again, it looks kind of like the lead-back phase, where the spots are sometimes blue, but sometimes white and star-like. You do sometimes get blue spotted salamanders that don't have very many spots, and there is debate on whether they're blue spotted salamanders or unisexual salamanders, and this is kind of a difficult identification problem. South of North Bay, there are Jefferson salamanders and smallmouth salamanders that look very similar to the blue spotted salamander. In fact, if you have a unisexual salamander, it can mate with any of these, and it becomes difficult to tell what you have unless you do genetic testing. If you have a blue spotted salamander that's got clearly visible blue spots, awesome, that's what you have. If you have something that looks like a blue spotted salamander, but it doesn't have blue spots on it, then you might need to talk to someone who knows a little bit more about salamanders than me. Our one and only newt in the area, eastern newt, they are aquatic, and they have flattened tails for swimming, and they have bright red dots along their sides. When they are in their immature phase, they live on land and they're bright red. We call them red Fs. I have more often in my life found red Fs while looking for salamanders in the forest than I've ever found eastern newts while looking for critters in rivers and streams. Just because the red F is just so vibrant. And then we have the mud puppy. This is our biggest salamander. They can be, when they're small, the size fit on your hand, but then they can grow quite large, where you need 2 hands to hold them. They are very big. They're fully aquatic. Those are red gills you're seeing off the side of its head. And their legs are much reduced. Some people find these ice fishing every year. You hear tales on Lake Nipissing of people catching mud puppies. That ends our amphibians. As you move further north, there are fewer and fewer amphibians, so all of the creatures that live here have to survive a winter, so it becomes a little bit tougher. Moving on to our reptiles. Most of the reptiles in this area are snakes. We have quite a few different kinds. You're probably familiar with the garter snake. Now I'm going to say that again, it is a garter snake, not a garden snake. A garter is a striped band that you used to wear around your leg to hold up your stockings. And people thought they looked like garters. Garter snakes are very common. They come in a couple of color varieties. You might find red ones occasionally. They are very similar to ribbon snakes. Ribbon snakes are not quite as common. Ribbon snakes have narrower heads, cleaner stripes, whiter lips, and they have a white dot in front of their eye. Almost, you can see it quite clearly on this picture. You can see how clear the lines are as well. The garter snakes, they have sort of black lines on their lips. There's no white on their face whatsoever. Their face is wider, although you don't really see that unless you have another snake to compare it to. But their stripes are more jagged, not crisp, clean lines like a ribbon snake is. And they never have that white line on their eye. The next three are the little guys. These guys, see the smooth green snake in the bottom here? In your hand. Like, that's as big as they ever get. Green snakes can grow a little bit bigger than this, but generally all the ring neck snakes and green snakes and red-bellied snakes I've seen have been tiny like this. They don't grow very big. They're pretty easy to tell. The smooth green snake is literally the only green snake in Ontario. The red-bellied and ring-necked snake look similar, but quite different, but I can see people getting them confused. The red-bellied snake has a different red color than the ring-necked snake. It's lacking that distinctive ring, but also the red-bellied snake has keeled scales. So they actually have a line going down the middle of them, whereas the ring-bellied, whereas the ring-necked snake has smooth scales. But these are very beautiful snakes to find, but they're small, so not always as easily found. Here we have the non-poisonous spotted snakes. So these guys look like they could be a rattlesnake, but they're not a rattlesnake. The water snake is probably the most common in our area. When they're little, they look a lot like a milk snake. They have a lighter skin tone with darker splotches with dark lines on them. But as they get older, you start to lose the ability to see those colorings. So an older water snake looks dark brown or black almost, especially when they're in the water. They do have keeled scales. So again, they look rougher, not as smooth and shiny. Milk snake has sort of a whitish light gray body with reddish spots. The fox snake has like a distinctive yellowy color to it that the milk snake is missing. And Decay's brown snake is quite brown, and the spots aren't nearly as spotty. It's like 2 rows of darker spotches. They're much more uniform than the splotchy markings that are on the fox snake and milk snake and water snake. So these two are the poisonous snakes we have. The 2 pictures on the bottom are the Massasauga rattlesnake. They have your typical diamond head, but the splotches look kind of striped on the head. And the splotches themselves are like saddle shaped or butterfly shaped. They're not round like the other species we were looking at. It of course also has a rattle. Hopefully it rattles and you hear it before you see it. The hognose snake has sometimes a flattened head. It doesn't have to be, but it can flatten its head. When it does flatten its head, you will see those 2 splotches behind its eyes. The rest of its body, the colors vary greatly. But if you do get a good look at its face, it does have a very distinctive upturned nose, if you do get to see its face. The coloring is difficult because it just changes so much. But usually that head and face are so distinctive, coloring is less important. We don't have Massasauga rattlesnakes directly in North Bay. They have been seen on either side of the French River. I was always told as a child that they're only south of the French River, but there have been sightings north as well. They are extremely endangered, however. Our last order are turtles. And again, there's not very many. All these critters are trying to survive a winter. I'm going to start with the snapping turtle. I'm assuming most of you know what a snapping turtle looks like. They're pretty distinctive. They can grow huge, like big, but they always start off small, the size of your palm, but they still, even when they're tiny, look like a scary snapping turtle covered in some like prehistoric dinosaur type scales and spikes. The most common turtle in our area is the painted turtle. It has yellow stripes on its face and red and orange stripes underneath, and you see the coloring on the plastrum as well. The map turtle is less common. There's very little orange and red. It's all yellow striping. The dome is less rounded, but they're very similar turtles. Sometimes you will see a red slider, which does not have quite as many pretty colors as the painted turtle does, but it does have a red ear spot on its head. This is not a native to Ontario species. If you find one in the wild, you should try to catch it and bring it to a rehabilitation center. It is a pet that has been released. People buy them, and then turtles live a very long time, and people don't want to deal with them anymore and release them into the wild, which they really shouldn't. Our other three turtles are not super common. We're really lucky in North Bay. We have a very thriving Blandings turtle population. Despite them being quite common in North Bay, they are threatened provincially and very rare in some places. They just happen to like our habitat. They have a very smooth, much deeper dome than a painted turtle. The painted turtle is sort of a smoother, or not smoother, more bumpy dome and shallower. So that really higher dome of a Blandings turtle, and the bright yellow throat if you actually do get to see the throat. Blandings turtle can be bigger than a painted turtle, like its maximum size is bigger. Both the stinkpot and the spotted turtle are tiny little like river pond turtles. So you only find spotted turtles in rivers. They're super endangered. The rivers where they are found are highly kept secrets because they don't want the population to be sought after. But they're tiny, like one fits in your hand. That's the stinkpot turtles in someone's hand. They're tiny, cute little turtles. The stinkpot turtle is also called a musk turtle. You're very lucky if you find yourself a musk turtle or a spotted turtle. And that is all of our reptiles and amphibians locally. I got all of the sounds and most of the data from Ontario Nature, and they are the ones that run the Herpetofaunal Atlas, as well as the Breeding Bird Atlas that is about to start in January under their citizen science. So I urge you to start recording when you find reptiles and amphibians and add to that atlas.